Good morning, everybody, and happy Wednesday. Is today Wednesday? Yes, Wednesday, January 5th. Um, yeah, so I saw a press conference that our new mayor, Eric Adams, had conducted with Brooklyn DA Eric Gonzalez and the NYPD on these indictments that they brought down on uh, about I think somewhere around like 17 to 19 gang members in Brooklyn, where they're saying that they were kind of terrorizing the whole borough by like expanding their gang enterprise by converting one gang, into three by forging new alliances. And we see the gun violence; it's rampant all across this city. And you know, I really took the time. I really listened very thoroughly to everything that was being said in that press conference, especially from Eric Adams. And I got to tell you, uh, he was on point with a lot of the stuff he was saying. All feelings or biases aside, um, a lot of the stuff that he was saying was it was it was it was on point. It was correct. Now, it's one thing when we identify the problem, but what are we going to do? What we need to do to fix it? So I'm just putting this out here just to let, especially my people here in Brooklyn and especially in East New York, where most of the violence is, that so far Eric is talking the talk. Now I think he missed a couple of things, but he was largely on point with what he was saying. But I think we've underestimated or just not really considered the level of hopelessness that is amongst these kids. There was a lot of talk about culture. This is the culture. I think Eric Gonzalez was asked, why do you think this is happening? And he was just like, it's just it, it was something to the effect of, it's like he's basically saying that they get women, they get this, and they look at it as a badge of honor. The more guns they get and the more violence. But I don't think he went deep enough to understand that this is really more a way, well, a twisted, or I would say it's a very skewed perception of power. Because when we're talking about our young people, especially young Black men who are powerless in society, when you feel this hopelessness, when nothing is going your way, when you're homeless, when you have no money, when you're trapped within a dysfunctional family situation, whether it be you're denied education or any other opportunities, or even the adequate mental health that you need, you look at life very differently, and you see no value in yourself. And I've spoken about this before. It's this lack of value that we see in ourselves. And when you feel like you have no value and you feel like you have no power, you're going to seize any opportunity to exact power upon anyone, because it gives you value, or in your or a false sense. It gives you in your mind value. If it takes violence to to enable you to dominate others, enable to uh increase your profile, and it enables you to be seen, sometimes people will just take that. you know there's nothing more tragic than being ignored and unheard. And just like with the young child, like just like with a kid, when if you don't pay attention to them, what do? They cry, they make noise, they act out, right? They act out. But why? It's for attention. So when you've been ignored, largely ignored by society, you're going to do whatever you can do to get attention. to be seen as important, to be seen as valuable. And unfortunately, when you've been denied so much in opportunity, you're going to grab onto whatever you can that will be perceived value because it's valuable in some way to somebody. So they'll take that other than just sitting back and being nothing in their eyes. So it's really about attacking the opportunities that so many of these young men have been denied. I understand that we have listen, it's a lot. There's a lot that we got to deal with when it comes to the contributors to violence. And it's not race that contributes to violence, it is economics. It is the status quo that preys upon certain communities. And we have to acknowledge that. Whenever we bring that up, you always see, the racists jump in and, oh, here we go. We're making it about race again. Well, it is about race. Face it, it is about race. And just because you don't want to talk about it, that doesn't mean that that isn't the problem. Because you're sitting in your privileged position, you're sitting in your neighborhood, your upper middle class neighborhood in New York, and you don't experience what we're experiencing in certain neighborhoods. So it's easy for you to dismiss it. And that's white privilege. That's the same white privilege that we always talk about that you get so offended by. And I wonder how things would play out if you were seeing this type of violence in your neighborhoods specifically, based in the drug use, the heavy drug use, mental illness. Would you say that it's white kids? Is these damn? I mean, come on, to my white folks out here, my white liberals, my white conservatives, Republicans, whatever you are. If there was violence in your neighborhoods because there was a large amount of homelessness, there wasn't adequate funding being sent to your neighborhoods, your schools were underfunded, the property value is plummeting because of dilapidated housing and no resources being poured into your community, and even things as far even something like sanitation, even if the sanitation department doesn't even come through your neighborhoods like that and it's just looking like a real shithole, would you blame the system for not upholding its part, or would you blame white kids? Would you say it's white culture? Because I don't see white people pointing at other white people to say that we're the problem. So why is it so easy to point at black children and say that they are the problem because they're black, while completely ignoring all of the systems that have been put in place that relegate them to a certain second-class citizen position in society? You're not seeing these crime levels in rich neighborhoods, in upper middle class neighborhoods. Why? So it's very convenient to peer down your noses at another group. Why? Because this shit isn't happening in your neighborhoods. When in many cases, the crime levels that have skyrocketed over the last year and a half to 2 years, a lot of that even stems from a lot of your family members, people from your neighborhoods migrating to black neighborhoods because y'all kicked them out, and now a lot of your daughters and your sons and your nephews who are drug users, heavy drug users, they're now in my neighborhood. Most of the wave of crackheads and new heroin addicts in my neighborhood, they don't come from my neighborhood. A lot of these folks come from Bay Ridge, and they come from Bensonhurst. They come from Staten Island, certain parts of Staten Island. So I think it's easy for us to talk shit about a certain group of people just as long as the issues that are arising, they just kind of stay over there. But you see, everyone has kind of become concerned because it's spilling out all over the city. But that's what happens, when we're talking about hopelessness. So I hope Eric Adams finds a way to instill or work towards instilling a sense of value in these kids by providing real opportunities to them and not just punitive solutions. And yes, there has to be punitive solutions because listen, I'm a parent. I have a 14-year-old son. And when I was listening to that press conference and I was hearing, and it's not even just what they said, because a lot of times they lie, but they were telling the truth in a lot of cases because the streets is the streets talk. And they are approaching middle schoolers to join these gangs. And when I see that they're shooting, that there's 14-year-olds that are shooting out here, and my kid is 14 years old and he's a good kid. And then when I see that kids are visiting from out of town, or kids who are, college students and working hard and have bright futures ahead of them, but maybe they have a friend or a cousin who's in a gang, and then you go to a party with that cousin and now you get killed, I got to worry about that. It's like I want to keep my son in the house and away from everyone. We're living under siege in this city. And it's so sad to say that because I love my community and I love my young Black men and boys. But they've been abandoned by a system that tells them that they are worthless. But they've also been abandoned by their parents to some degree. And yes, there's a lot of absence of parenting, and we see this. But then we got to also look like, who are the parents? And what were they deprived of that leads them to not be there in the proper capacity for their children? We assume that these parents are just, they know better and that they are the authority in these shooters' lives or in these young gang members' lives. How do we know that these parents are not just as lost as their children? This is why it's so easy to write people off and just come up with these broad generalizations as to what is going on and how we got here. We ignore the crack era. We ignore the war on drugs that we know was basically a sham. But we forget about all the people who were targeted by it and all of the people who were victims of it. We forgot about that the crack era yielded crack babies. We forgot that crack babies raised a generation of kids that really had no real guidance. So then where do you go from there? So we can't continue to propagate the same problems over and over again, because it will visit us again through our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And we have to find a way to end this cycle. So, like I said before, I have a lot of misgivings about this guy, Eric Adams, but I will be honest. I'm not, well, yeah, I can't lie, because here's the thing. I think in certain areas he's doing well and he's talking that talk. But when it comes to these mandates, just the fact that he's still pushing that bullshit, that's a non-starter for me. So I cannot say that he's doing a good job because he's pushing authoritarianism on one side and justice on the other. That duality cannot exist, especially not in this city where we need to be very precise in executing whatever policies are necessary and really getting to the core of the problem. I'm not seeing that yet. Yes, I mean, let's be real. A lot of people need to be arrested because like, you can't even go outside right now without being afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. Somebody gonna get shot. And it's not even me worrying so much about myself. I worry about my kid, man. Everybody I know, so many friends, they're just fleeing the city. They're getting the hell out of New York. The quality of life here is trash. Everybody's under pressure. I mean, did we forget that the whole entire response to COVID has been horrible in this city, and it led to really a lot of trauma to a lot of people in this city who are still undergoing trauma. So don't we think that that environment also contributes to the elevated levels of crime? Don't we think that the amount of homeless people on the streets who have been abandoned and the amount of mentally ill who are dumped out onto the street with no resources contributes to the problem? Don't we think that just everyday hardworking New Yorkers who are subjected to heavy ticketing and regulation at every turn, don't we think that contributes to the problem? Don't we think that with all this crime that we're seeing surrounding us and there's no real police presence, like or any type of action on their part to quell the problem, we don't you don't think that contributes to the problem? We don't think that these visible open drug markets where crackheads are right there on the sidewalk smoking crack as women walk by with their toddlers contributes to the problem? I mean, there's a hell of a lot of factors that contribute to elevated crime. And it isn't just gangs. So when Eric Adams says that we have to attack the root of the problem, I hope he truly identifies what the root of that problem is. And it isn't just young black men. Now, I'm not saying he said that because he didn't. He did speak, he spoke a lot of empathy. But at the same time, I'm not sure if he truly understands how this issue must be approached. But time will tell. In fact, I wish, I would like to have a conversation with him because all I've been doing for all the time that I've been here on this in this little social media space and in this, local political activist, whatever you want to call it, space, all I've ever wanted was just to have an opportunity to have a conversation where someone is truly listening. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with politics and these elected officials and even a lot of these activists and organizers, this ain't nobody's listening too much. Everybody wants to be heard and everybody wants their everybody wants the stage. But no one is really listening to get to the bottom of the issues and truly do the work to solve a lot of these problems because it can be done. So I'm always going to have that skepticism because why? Unfortunately, most of our favorite politicians, they're very good at talking that talk. But we got to see them walk the walk for once. Please walk that walk. Now, Eric Adams sounds like he's setting up to walk the walk in certain areas, but I find it hard to believe that as a man who pursued a holistic solution to his health problems successfully, that he truly believes that the only way out of this so-called pandemic is through forcing people to take this shot that ain't working. So you see how things get really equivocal when you consider those factors. Like, why are you talking and talk right here? You're doing podcasts where you're talking about how you refuse to listen to your doctors and they just wanted you to just take medicine and they gave you this grim, bleak prognosis, but you decided, no, I'm going to do my research. This is literally what you said. You were going to do your research and you decided that you were going to reverse your condition and you did it. So if you did all of that and you spoke to healing your body through natural measures, right? Just through natural means and through exercise and boosting your health and your immune system and all of that, I find it hard to believe that with all the information out there, that you truly believe that the best way forward for this city is to require boosters and mandate that people take these shots and then try to force it on our children. Bruh, what? So we got to be careful when we pledge our support unequivocally and unilaterally to certain politicians when they're when they're not really showing you, or actually when they're showing you why you shouldn't trust them. So I'm hoping, at least as it pertains to crime in this city, that they get a handle on it. But it's not just getting a handle on it. Because there's always going to be crime. Like, how long have we been dealing with higher crime levels in poorer communities, even when crime went down? I mean, there was a point in this city where I think there was like no shootings, I remember, for like a whole year in East New York, right? But then that was during a better economy. That was when there was actually a lot more social programs that were available for these kids in these neighborhoods. And I remember that, like, that's when they started like flooding the neighborhoods with these violence interrupters and these programs that were here that was supposed to be doing some outreach. But now, if we're going to be honest with each other, a lot of these programs that we claim are doing the work and they're getting all this money, we're not really seeing them out here in these streets with really engaging with these young people. And in some cases, it may not even be their fault, because there's a disconnect. There's a generational disconnect. So we really have to find ways to really engage in conversations with these young people, because we're just talking about them, but we're not really talking to them. And this has always been the issue when it comes to these generational differences. And I've talked about this previously. We have to truly be willing to invest in our young people, but that requires us listening to them, talking to them, involve them in the conversation. We have all these town halls. Over the past 2 years, I've seen all these press conferences. I've seen these community-based town halls that they had, but the people that were always missing from these conversations, who were never engaged or involved in it, were the people who are actually in the shit, the people who are actually in these conditions that are at the center of this conversation. Why don't we talk to them to see what they need? Why don't we talk to them to find out why they think they need to do what they're doing? What is it that is missing? We're not having that conversation. We have to really invest in building alternative pathways for these young men. And the only way to do that is by listening to them, being willing to talk to them, not just talk about them. That's the only way. And then you have to be willing to truly invest the resources that are required to affect real change. So this is most of the crime that you're seeing in this city it's a poverty issue. It's poverty-based crime. The random attacks that you see where people are being pushed into the train or pushed in front of the trains, that's mentally ill people. Why don't they have why are they there? Why are they on the streets anyway with no resources? Could it have to do with the Thrive NYC program that didn't do shit, although it made $1.5 billion disappear under Mayor Bill de Blasio? We think that the solution to issues is just by, coming up with a new budget proposal and throwing money at a situation without actually utilizing that money for the situation. You can't keep throwing a dollar sign, a symbolic dollar sign on solutions, especially when you're not investing them into the programs that certain communities need. Homelessness everywhere. I mean, you can't get on the train without, it's disgusting in this city. But there's no resources available in order to prevent elevated crime levels, because we know that's where it's going. When you pack people up, you know, in a very tight space and you take away their resources, this is what happens. We are in probably like the worst economic situation. Well, in my lifetime, like living in this city, and I've been through some tough times, but this is one of the worst financial um moments in my life living in this city. Poor people are getting poorer and they're being squeezed out, forced in a position where they have to consider selling their houses, their properties, their primary investment of wealth for pennies on the dollar, just so they can survive and keep their heads above water. Where are all the resources to help the people who are basically being stressed to death over the lack of opportunity and 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 aid available in this city? What about all the homeowners who have rental properties and they've been here struggling for 2 years with no rent because of these stupid policies? Why don't we identify the fact that maybe another contributor to the elevated crime was the broad sweeping bail reform legislation? I saw one of the reporters ask at the press conference, they were like, well, yeah, out of all those people arrested, has anyone been out on bail? Is anyone, back on the streets? And that made me think, damn, I remember people shooting people and stabbing people and they got out the same day. So if you're going to fix the problem, you got to tackle a lot of the shit that got us here in the first place. And that's going to mean that you're going to have to undo a lot of the shit that was done under our previous mayor, Mayor Adams. Are you willing to do that? I know you keep saying that you don't want to criticize the previous administration, which is a mistake, because if you're here in service to the people of this city, then it doesn't matter. You got to call it out. There's no friends in this. This is not about, being nice and polite. You got to just tell the truth, brother. Bill de Blasio is the worst mayor in the history of New York City, in New York City history. And if you're unwilling to call him out and you continue to say how he did such a great job, that drastically reduces our confidence in you and your intentions and your ability. So I will say, as it pertains to this new push that we're going to see with the NYPD, we see the anti-crime unit coming back, the gun boys. I'll say this to a lot of y'all young people out there that's engaging in this gang life: y'all better get it together and y'all better start considering doing something else. And the sad thing is, they talked a lot about this being culture, this violence being culture. Now, that is not our culture, but it is leading to what is perceived as a culture, especially when you see the prevalence of this in the music. There is nothing more anti-Black in this society today than our own rap music. Why is that? Why do we perceive our value based on how many gold chains we got, how many fancy watches, how many nice cars we got, how many light-skinned chicks we got surrounding us? Because for me, that actually serves as a very outward display of our own self-hate and our lack of understanding of our own value. So I think our task should be to instill a sense of value in our young people, one at a time. Start engaging with them. I know a lot of us are afraid. I'm not saying run up to one of these kids that's posted up on the corner that you know they carry a gun, nothing like that. But let's start engaging more with the young people, as a community, not just through non-profit programs that are just taking money from the city and not really doing shit with the money. We have to do this. We have to take the charge. I can't do it alone. And I'm not saying I'm the only one, but there are very few of us who are really taking the call to do this and invest of ourselves into this and truly reaching out to these young people and trying to be a voice for them, because I understand that sometimes there are people that listen, sometimes some people just can't be saved. They might be too far gone. But that's not the case with our young men as a collective at all, because they're currently experiencing the trauma that leads them down this path. So we have to find a way to alleviate the trauma. So that's what it is, Mayor Adams. Find a way to ease up on the trauma that is being caused to these young men. And I'm sure we'll see a difference. So that's my little spiel for today. And my one fear is that by getting police officers back on these streets to do their jobs, my fear is that they may become once again emboldened to violate the public, disrespect the public, and engage in racial profiling again. Because when you're talking about bringing back stop and frisk, that's a very, very slippery slope. And it was already deemed unconstitutional. And one of the key witnesses that led to that decision was Eric Adams, our mayor. He was one of the voices that spoke out most forcefully against it. And now he's bringing it back. And we know where the gun crimes unit is going to be. They're going to be in my neighborhood. They're going to be in Black neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods. We know where they're going to be. How are they going to do their jobs? Are they going to just view everybody that looks like my son as probable cause and a suspect? I worry about that, because I was a suspect for walking to the store with a pair of slippers on and a t-shirt. So what will lead them to decide that my 14-year-old son, who has never, ever had any interaction with the police, who's never gotten into any sort of trouble, who likes anime, what happens when they decide to look at him through the same lens that they use to look at someone who was just caught firing a gun the day before? Be careful. Be careful, New York. Be careful what you ask for. Be careful, Black people. Be careful in the things that you support and that you cape for without thinking it through. Because the ones that'll be paying the price for these decisions and our hastiness will be our children.